Hey guys, this is David Wunderlich, and right now I'm going to show you a play from Florida's run defense against Kentucky. On this play, it's shortly before the half, and Benny Snell is going to end up taking a handoff and going 44 yards with it. So this is the Gators giving up a big play. So what happened? Well, in general, run defense and run offense is all about gaps, and gaps are any space on either side of a blocker. So if we just look at the Kentucky offensive line, there are 6 gaps. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That means if we ignore everybody else, there are 6 potential ways for a ball carrier to go. On this play, Kentucky is essentially going to sacrifice one of its gaps because this guy and this guy are going to double team the nose tackle Elijah Conliffe. In that sense, because Kentucky is closing off that gap on its own volition, there are only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 gaps. And if we count the number of players Florida has, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in the box, that is a good story for the Florida defense. However, this H-back tight end is going to be a blocker as well. When he adds into the bunch, that means there will be 6 gaps again. After the snap, this H-back tight end is going to go over to the left of the offense. Wherever he ends up going, he is going to create a new gap. And so the linebackers, Vashon Joseph and Rayshad Jackson, they are going to be watching which way this H-back tight end goes, because often, not always, but often, where a moving blocker like that goes is going to tell you which way the ball carrier wants to go. And on this particular play, the H-back goes left, and the running back is actually going to want to go left as well, but we'll see what happens. So if we just run it forward a little bit, you see here's the snap, and there goes the H-back. Now, I'm going to freeze it right here because this is how we look at gaps again. So we have the outside gap, we have the gap between the left guard and left tackle, the gap between the center and left guard, and now we have the H-back is right about here. And so if he ends up going through this hole, that means there will be 2 gaps between the right guard and right tackle, where previously there was only 1. And he has the option of going to the outside and blocking over here as well, in which case there will now be 1, 2 gaps to the outside of the tackle instead of just the 1. And so that is where Joseph and Jackson come in. Jabari Zuniga, the defensive end, he is just standing up the right tackle here because he wants to have the flexibility to go on either side, depending on which way the ball carrier goes. Joseph is assigned this way, and Jackson is assigned to the outside. So that, if the tight end comes this way, Joseph has this gap, Zuniga has this gap, and Jackson has the outside gap. All 3 of these gaps are taken. If the tight end goes to the outside, which is actually what he ends up doing, Joseph will take this single gap, Zuniga will be able to take the outside gap, and Jackson will be able to take the furthest gap. And so whichever way these 3 gaps created by the tight end and the offensive lineman go, Florida is going to have it covered. However, if you remember this double team, Kentucky essentially sacrificed a gap by doing this double team on Conliffe. But the upshot of that is that Conliffe is no longer covering a gap. And so Florida only has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 players available to cover gaps. Whichever way this ends up, which, like I said, the tight end comes to the outside, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 gaps. And so this is a very good play design and good execution by the Kentucky offense. There are 6 gaps, and there are only going to be 5 box defenders for those gaps. So if we run it forward a little bit more, we see TJ Slaton has beaten the left guard, and he's getting good penetration into the backfield. Benny Snell has good vision. He's been watching this the whole time, and he also sees that the guard who was beaten is still pushing Slaton that way, and he's got good momentum to continue pushing him that way. And so Snell is going to bounce it out the other way. And he has seen that these linebackers came this way as well, so he knows that somewhere there is an open gap, and that gap happens to be right this way between the left tackle and left guard, and that is exactly where he goes. And so now I want to talk about, instead of gaps, I'm going to talk about numbers. So here is how the play has developed as the handoff has been taken. We can draw a line directly up the hash, which is the place the ball was snapped from. On you, the viewer's left side of this line, we've got Chauncey Gardner-Johnson blitzing in, I believe in case the quarterback does a bootleg, and he does do that motion, he didn't keep the ball. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 players on the left side of this formation, and Kentucky only has 1, 2, 3 players on that side. On the offense's right, your left, the viewer, Florida has a 5-on-3 advantage. On the offense's left side, Florida only has 1, 2, 3 defenders, and Kentucky has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 players. On that side, Kentucky is the one that has the 5-on-3 advantage. So if the running back can get past any of these linemen, and he will do that because, again, this guy's pushing this way, the double team has Conliffe in hand, and Polite is taking the outside. That means he can come this way, and there is no one over here. Obviously, that's where he goes to get this big gain. Now, on this play, the last line of defense is the safety, Jawaan Taylor. He is playing center field, essentially, because Florida is doing a one-high look, meaning there's only one safety in the back. The other safety is up closer doing something else. And so if we look at this play from a different angle, here we get kind of an idea of what Taylor may have been looking at. Over here, Kentucky has these 2 receivers in a stacked formation. Up to this point in the game, Kentucky has used it 3 previous times, and all 3 of those times were runs. So Florida is pretty much expecting a run from this particular formation, and you can tell that because Gardner Johnson is going to come this way in case of a quarterback run, rather than worrying about these 2 guys. And if we go forward a little bit, we have a cornerback, Trey Dean, and a safety, Donovan Steiner. They are staying on this side to deal with those 2 receivers. Now, if we look at what Taylor's doing before the play, he lines up almost directly on the hash, and he kind of shades over to his right, the offense's left, and then he's going to back up because, again, he's playing center field, and he wants to be able to help out over here if Wilson ends up throwing the bubble or keeps the ball and runs this way. The problem with this is that the run ends up going to the offense's left. Instead of being in the dead center of the formation, which again is the hash mark, Taylor is about a yard off of the hash to the offense's right, his left. Run it forward. You can see he gets maybe about a yard and a half, almost 2 yards there with his left foot away from the hash. And that is critical because as he comes over and he's trying to make this tackle, you see he gets pretty close, but there still is a gap of about, 3 feet or so there. Here it is from the reverse view. He's coming in, and if he was a yard and a half, 2 yards closer, he would have been able to make this tackle. But instead, because he was a little bit out of position for guarding a run to that direction, he ends up getting tripped up by the linebacker Joseph, who's making a failed diving tackle, and there's a good receiver block over here from Kentucky's receiver, and so Snell is able to beat all of those guys, and CJ Henderson has to catch him from behind to put him out of bounds. So this is a situation where Florida's run defense did what it was supposed to do. The linebackers were following that H-back, and they were plugging all of the gaps on the side where the run seemed like it was supposed to go. Because Slayton was able to get up the field so quickly, it actually opened up that cutback lane, and Snell ended up going the opposite direction to the offense's left, the defense's right, and there was no one over there to make the tackle before Snell got really far up the field. Taylor got himself a bit out of position, I think, because he was discounting the possibility of a run to the side where the numbers were weak, and because Florida's numbers were weak, Snell was able to take off and get a big explosive gain.